Hey folks, Dan here. Before we get into it, if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe button. And keep in mind that these are my own thoughts, opinions, and ideas. These are not meant to be, nor should you take them as investment or trading advice in any way, shape, or form. Do your own due diligence, put in the work for yourself, and make your decisions based on that. Enjoy.
All right, folks, here we are on Sunday, November 24th. We're going to take a look at RGTI today. So with quantum computing getting a bunch of love lately, I thought we'd come check in on RGTI. If there's other quantum computing stocks that you'd like me to take a look at, just leave it in the comments. But we've never charted RGTI, so we have to start fresh today. First thing, I'm going to put in a little trend line, if it makes sense here. Let's see what it looks like. But there was this downtrend resistance that it was caught under for quite a while. It's still pretty tight in to that level, so that's why I wanted to put it on here, just meaning that if it doesn't have much oomph in this swing, like if this doesn't get legs, right, you sort of see a little bit of a double top happening here, I would maybe just look for it to re-engage with that. It has once already, I guess we could say twice already if you want to count this attempted break as well. So we're sort of like in the third attempt of a break, but it's pretty recent as well. And there's almost, we could put in another sort of, though this is very steep, so I'd maybe just be cautious about this, but a very steep uptrend support. But if it does come banging down kind of hard like it did over here, maybe that's the range or the zone in which I would look for it to catch some support if it comes down hard. Now, I don't know that it'll be able to continue that. I'm going to turn this a different color because it's kind of annoying. If it does continue to follow that for a while, that would be a pretty significant and impressive run, but I guess we'll see how it interplays with either of those things. If it even, maybe it leaves this behind once and for all, and I'm sure the RGTI bulls would certainly appreciate that. But, those things stood out to me first. Now let's put in a few support and resistance levels. Let's see, it's something between like 150 and 225 or so. Let's give ourselves at least that amount of room. If we can find price action that makes sense to put in. That's way down at 125, I know, but it gets a little bit thin in here. And I don't want to clutter the chart too much and just make it like annoyingly hard to look at. So let's try to not leave ourselves too barren, but not get too cluttered. Okay. So here's where I see it. Let me get one more in here somewhere. Yeah, that looks good. Okay. So these are the levels that I would be looking at if I were in RGTI. Let's go to the recent price action. So the nearest in levels, wicked off of this 183 on Friday, and then it wicked up from the 159. So both of those coming into play, but those are, to my eye, the nearest in levels. There are some thinner levels, meaning just sort of less price action to go off of. One here around like 170, but I'm not going to put that in again for want to not be too cluttered, especially with these trend lines. It might just get hard to look at. If it does get dippy and it can't hold that uptrend, or if it sort of re-engages with it really quickly, that 140 may come into play. If it loses it altogether and maybe dips down toward or even under this previous downtrend resistance, 125 may be a spot to look for some support. Now, if it continues on through 183, or if it comes up and sort of reconfirms off of there, right, that's the spot that it's had a hard time holding on this really chaotic recent swing. 209, right? So stretching up above. I wouldn't be shocked if $2 plays some role because, it's just the psychological level. But it does look to me like it has, it's just chopped through there so many times in the past, right? You see how really choppy it gets. So it wouldn't shock me if it sort of situates a little bit above and a little bit below, right? So like 209 down to like 194 or something like that, and just sort of gets a little choppy in there before it decides if it's going to sell off from that level, if it's going to push through. But who knows? It's chopped through there so much in the past. Maybe there's the potential that that wall is a little bit exhausted, and maybe it's able to move through quickly. I mean, it's also going to depend on sort of the hype, the meme status, retail coming in, catalysts, and the macro forces of not only the quantum computing sector, but certainly the overall market. Beyond that, 229, if it does get legs through 209, 229 is maybe something that I'd look for. But it'd be interesting to see if it's able to turn any of these trend lines into something. Like I said, it would take quite a bit to continue that uptrend, but hey, it could certainly happen. Now, wavy gravy on these EMAs, but we are very much in a fully bullish formation at the moment. So the 183 down here, that as your sort of like longer term support right around 113. We saw it did reconfirm off of that on that initial swing, right? So while the swings look a little more chaotic when you pull in those trend lines that we just had, it makes a little bit more sense if you're just looking at the clean EMAs, right? You see previous price action had pushed right off of that 183, wanted nothing to do with it. Sellers were happy to unload shares at that price point, and it sold off quite heavy. Now here, where it was able to push through and get some distance from it, it banged right back down again, sort of sellers wanting to come in as it got stretched through that 183 EMA and kind of retest that position. And it did so and was able to push higher, right? That's that push up to 189. So quite I guess we could say impressive move there. And maybe gives it an opportunity. When it did swing down off of that 189 high, it only came down to the 21 EMA, this like peach one in the middle here. So a short-term EMA, not even needing to come down to the longer-term, short-term EMA that we have being the 34, that red one. So that could certainly give an indication of more bullish momentum that's sort of ready and available to be exhausted, as we see it sort of pushing off of that quite strongly with a 17.5% gain on Friday. So I would continue to look at this and see, when it does get dippy, does it come and need the 21 continuously? Does it come and start to need the 34? Or is it able to just move what you ultimately want if you're like a real sort of raging bull, meaning you just want this puppy to fly relatively fast and high? I would want it to be pushing off of the white, the 8 EMA, and not needing to come down to the 21. So, that's sort of to be determined, right? We'll see where that sort of lands. But the EMAs are quite interesting, maybe even a little bit more useful at the moment than these levels, just because there is choppy action to go off of previously, and these trend lines are just they in and of themselves are almost a little bit of a distraction to my eye, at least. Now, looking at the Thinkorswim study here, we see previous trigger and fire in the TTM squeeze indicator gave us a quick move up, and it pushed right off of that +1 ATR level. This was back in October, so really good motion and call out there with the levels. Came back in and found some support as it started to trigger again on the TTM squeeze indicator, and right now it's still firing, and it's still in the compression here on the phase oscillator. So we have phase oscillator compression, still firing, still triggering on the TTM squeeze indicator, these red dots, and putting in that candle on Friday was situated right between the call trigger, right, this blue line here, which is 152, and that initial ATR level, which is around like 185 or so. 180, yeah, maybe a little bit shy of that. But if it does continue on, it's able to stretch through and push to that full +1 ATR. Right now that's situated at 217. So that would be a nice percentage gain if it's able to reach through. And if it does, that probably sets it up nicely to come in at or even above the call trigger for December, which would be at like 194, and would bring it up to 227 and then to 259. So, interesting motion here, but it is herky-jerky. I do think even maybe more so than this, but this is a pretty decent setup to look at. I do think the EMAs over here, between those three options, the support or resistance levels, the EMAs, or the Think or Swim study, my eye would probably gravitate toward the EMAs because it is a little bit cleaner to look at, a little bit more straightforward. And like I said, what I'd mostly be looking for is if and when it dips again, where does it come to? Does it come to the 21? Does it come all the way down to the 34? Or is it able to get motion off of or even slightly above this white 8 EMA, which then would have me eyeing very strongly this 217 level that's on the Think or Swim study. One more thing I would quickly take a look at where the volume is. Yeah, I mean, still decent, but there's not sort of anything sort of super falling off here until you get quite far down. So there might be quite a bit of support, up more toward where the price action is now than it has been, at least in the recent past here. So it might be something sort of capable there from a volume perspective as well. All right, folks, so I hope that you've had a nice weekend and that you have a good trading week ahead. And as always, I appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next video.